If you don't have good public relations, it can all go south on you very quickly. And once it's gone south and once things aren't working out and you're being misinterpreted, it's very tough to turn things around.
Welcome to the Smart Talk series, the show for professionals who want strategies, tips, and real talk about all things PR, marketing, and social media. Your host is Melissa Vella-Williamson, an award-winning, accredited, and nationally recognized PR pro and communication thought leader. And now your host, Melissa Vella-Williamson.
Hello and welcome to the Smart Talk series. I'm Melissa Vella-Williamson. This season, our focus is on communication trailblazers. Today, I'm joined by Robert Dilenschneider. Robert Dilenschneider is the founder and CEO of the Dilenschneider Group, a global strategic counseling and public relations firm headquartered in New York. He previously served as the CEO of Hill Knowlton. He serves on several boards, including the Institute of International Education. Welcome, Robert.
Well, this is just fantastic to have the opportunity.
Well, Robert, you have a phenomenal background and extensive years of work in this business, particularly in public relations. Can you tell us a little bit more about that background and what you're up to today?
Well, I was very, very fortunate. I went to the University of Notre Dame and got a tremendous education there. It's a wonderful place. I then took graduate degree at Ohio State. I met a man at Ohio State named Walter Seifert. And Seifert talked to me about public relations and all that was involved. And as a result of that, went to New York City and met a man named Sam Fry. Sam Fry worked for Ogilvy and Mather. And Sam Fry, after discussion, offered me a job. And it was terrific. And I said, Mr. Fry, I'll take your job. He said, I want you to go over to Hill Knowlton and meet some people over there. I didn't know what Hill Knowlton was. And I said, okay, but Mr. Fry, I want your job. He said, don't worry, it's going to be here when you get back, but you might like them better. So I walked over to Hill Knowlton. I did like them better. They did offer me a job. I took it. And so for probably 30 years, I took Sam Fry to lunch on his birthday and thanked him for what he did for me, because that wouldn't happen in today's environment. I'm sure of it. But it happened to me, and it was a real plus for me. Then at Hill Knowlton, I just frankly started a career in the office, working first in Findlay, Ohio, for Marathon Oil Company. Learned a lot there, by the way. Then for the Hill Knowlton's New York clients. And at one point, Richard Darrow, who was at that time the CEO of Hill Knowlton, said, Bob, we'd like you to go out to Chicago and open up the country. And I said, open up the country? He said, yeah, open up the world. So what I did was I went to Chicago, created 56 offices with about 4,500 employees around the world in public relations, and Hill Knowlton became the number one firm in the world at that point. So that's really what took me to where I am today, and it's been quite a ride.
Yeah, and you have to be a very steady, measured person to really do well in public relations, and especially at the level that you are playing in. For a lot of people, and I have a book coming out, and we'll talk about your book in just a minute, but it's really to show a lot of aspiring pros how to get into the field. So how did you find yourself into PR in the first place?
I had no idea what it was. I took a jump off the diving board and found my way into it, and I really liked it. And what I found was the ability to offer advice to people who really didn't have an inkling of what was going on was something I really enjoyed. I liked the people I worked with. A lot of them had come out of the Korean War, and they had their heads down and they were working very, very hard. So these men and women that I worked with in the early days wanted to succeed, and they wanted to succeed for themselves, for their families, and the right reasons. And they did everything they possibly could to make that happen, and it worked. Today's environment is a lot different from that, and people want to succeed, but it's a totally different set of standards that they use. So I believe, and I've told this to clients many times, that we have most of the people in our company are over 50 years old. And they say, well, where are the young phenoms? And I said, they're out there. They're really good. You should hire them if you like. But stick with us. We've got 30, 40 years of experience that might be helpful to you going forward on this critical issue. So that's worked out pretty well. And we find out that some of the clients with really serious problems like that experience level better than just kind of taking a chance.
That's smart that you pinpoint that difference for them, because I think a lot of our workplaces and workforces are concerned about ageism. And I think in public relations, if I saw nothing in the last few years of this pandemic, is that the real pros were those who had experience and wisdom to guide the way through all the chaos and the noise, understood the fundamental principles of public relations, and actually had the discipline to keep to those tenets. So I totally resonate with what you're saying. I think this is a career field that as you grow in time and experience, you can pull so much from that crystallized intelligence as you go on. So there doesn't have to be a cap, or it's not necessarily, oh, the newest, shiniest thing or the newest, shiniest pro. It's about that wisdom and experience.
The growth of public relations has been massive. I mean, the number of people coming into it from all over the country, all over the world, has been extraordinary. I have a call this afternoon with a man from Mongolia, and he wants to find a way into public relations. It's really quite extraordinary what's going on.
That's fantastic. Well, let's talk about finding that way. So you have a new book out, the Public Relations Handbook. You edited this fifth edition of the book. Can you tell us how that came about?
Sure. I wrote the first 4 editions of the Public Relations Handbook. Goes way, way back. I call in other people, obviously, to contribute, but I did pretty much the whole book myself. At this point, I called my publisher and I said, look, things have really changed pretty dramatically since the last handbook. Publisher said, what do you mean? And I said, there's this thing called social media. It's new from the last handbook, and people would like to know more about it. The political side has changed. The research side has changed. Basic work with the press has changed. It's all changed. So I said, let's do another handbook. He said, do you have time? Now, it takes a lot of time to do these handbooks. So I said, well, I'll do better than that. I will recruit the very best people in the world who will do chapters in the handbook, and they will tell your readers what they think about public relations. So editor was thrilled with that. And I went out and I recruited a man named Frank Luntz. Frank is probably the #1 researcher in the United States today, and he wrote a chapter on research. I recruited Art Gormley, who is probably the top person in terms of Wall Street in America today, and he wrote a chapter. So that's pretty much what I did, and it worked out very successful. The book has already received very good reviews, and frankly, I'm thrilled to be on your show talking about it.
That's incredible. So I see here that the first edition was published in 1967. That's
Right.
absolutely pioneering work. And I think that's really incredible. I love that in this edition, you have different chapters written by different pros who are experts in those areas. And actually, without even having met you, Robert, followed a similar type model with my book coming out. And I call it the pass the mic section. And essentially, that's what you did, right? Passing the mic to another pro to let them weigh in on the topic. So what kind of topics are new in this edition? I know you mentioned social media, but are there other ones that are new than in previous versions?
There are, but let me take you quickly back to 1967.
Yeah.
I was just beginning, and there was a man named Dan Forrestal who was a giant in the field and happened to work for Monsanto in St. Louis. And Forrestal was required to write the next book on public relations, the next handbook. Forrestal looked at me and he said, I want you to write it. And I said, Mr. Forrestal, that's fantastic. And he said, if it's any good, I'll give you a line on the cover, which he did. And that's really how that book started. So that book, authored by Forrestal and myself, started off and it was successful. So have things changed? Absolutely. Research has changed. Wall Street has changed. The whole political environment has changed. Things that motivate people have changed. Young people see things differently than older people. Women exerted themselves in a very constructive and positive way into the field. That's changed. So working with foreign governments, working with our own government, working with Wall Street, working with employees who oftentimes don't have the same needs employees of 20 years ago had. It's all changed. You've got to think about a different way of addressing it. I remember being at one time in a company. We were on the 6th floor of this company, and the company was being looked at by the press, the media. And the CEO walked over to the window, and he gestured to me, and I went over to the window with him. And he said, "You see that guy down there? Who is it?" And I said, "That's Dean Rothbard. He's a reporter for the Wall Street Journal." And the CEO said, "Well, let's get rid of him. Let's get him out of here." I said, "No." I said, "You go down and talk to Dean Rothbard and things will change." And he did. And he did get a very good press out of it.
Well, when you were working with your different collaborators on this book edition, did you learn anything new, or was there a new viewpoint that was different about PR?
Much more accepted than it ever was in the past. People today accept public relations. 20, 25 years ago, they were on the fence. 30, 35 years ago, they thought it was something they had to do. And so they reluctantly embraced it. People today put public relations front and center, number one. So that's the big change that has taken place. People know it's important and they do it. So the second big change that has taken place is people look at their workforces today. It's very different. When communicating, it used to be that you just put out a message and that was it. And you expected everybody to figure it out. Well, today it's very different. There are all kinds of different people of different backgrounds. They all receive a message a different way. And they really call for a very different approach in public relations. So what that means is your message has got to be short and powerful. The longer your message is, given the environment out there, the more difficult it's going to be to really get it across. Short, powerful message, strong words, very important. If you do that, you'll be able to reach all the people.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate in this handbook that you really include the need to positively position a company's commitment to environmental, social, and governance issues. Some pros, especially if they're newer in the business, ESG may be a little new. So can you explain what ESG is to our listeners and why it's increasing in importance today?
Well, ESG, of course, is now popular, environmental, social, and other issues. And the reason it's popular is because we all of a sudden have achieved, I think, a position in business where things are expected of business that were not expected of business before, and frankly, which business was unwilling or unable to deliver. Now, people see business and they're saying, protect our environment, deal with the social issues. They're saying that. So they're gauging whether you're supportive of ESG or not. And a lot of times that means that people are going to invest in you or not. People are going to join your company or not, stay with your company or not. It's a big factor.
Yeah, I think people are being very intentional about these aspects. So it's really important that you include and educate on that, Robert. That's awesome. Well, you're certainly a trailblazer in this field. Share with us some of the key lessons you think is important for someone's journey through public relations and how to make it a bit smoother.
The key things in public relations, I think, are simple. One is in virtually any field, you've got all kinds of options and ways of doing things. You got to be honest. That's extremely important. Now, that sounds obvious, but a lot of times people do skirt the truth or they don't come up with all the truth. So it's really important to be honest. Number two, it's very important to be able to express yourself in very short terms. I think sentences that are 30, 40 words long, forget about it. Sentences that are maybe 8 or 9 words long, absolutely. The language you use when you try to reflect on what's going forward is extremely important. Always think about language in a way that it leaves the reader or the listener with a positive feeling about what you're doing. And then do something that was taught to me by, I think, the smartest business person I ever met, a man named Jay Pritzker. Jay Pritzker led the Pritzker family, which is hugely successful. And I met him through the Hyatt chain where we dealt with a lot of crises. But I would talk to Jay about doing things. And I would say, we need to reach all these people. And Jay would say, no. He said, we really don't need to reach all these people. We just need to reach 2 people. And he said, how do we do that? And Jay taught me how to focus on real decision makers. That's something a lot of people in the public relations field don't know how to do. But Jay Pritzker taught me how to do it, and it has made a huge difference. So with every client I have, every single one, I've said to them, who is really going to make a difference for you? and generally talk about the broad general public. Well, that doesn't work. The broad general public doesn't make a difference. A few people make a difference within the broad general public. I think, right now I'm finishing up a book on character. And I'm saying in the book that a lot of the problems we have today in the country, in the world, are driven by people without character. And so I'm saying, let's use examples of 7 or 8 or 15 or even 20 people who do have character and who do the right thing and who really raise the bar for the reader. And I think it's going to be a very successful book. I'm optimistic about it. I'm using people like Bill Russell, who was the former center for the Boston Celtics, character. Indra Nooyi from India, who came over and ran Pepsi and took Pepsi to a totally new level, character. Ted Hesberg, former head of the University of Notre Dame, really put Notre Dame on the map, character. These people are people that would stand up, do the right thing, could be counted on, and you had no question they were doing the correct thing. So that's very important.
I think so. I absolutely agree. And particularly for the long game, which is what we play in public relations, right? There are people who are out there and they're flashy and they're loud, and maybe they're winning in the short term. But over time, if they don't have good character, that will crumble eventually. And I think that that's what's really hard for individuals in our country to wrap their minds around today is, what are the seeds I can plant that will bring the right harvest in the right time for my life and will continue to reap benefits versus how do I make a quick dollar, right? And which is a lot of times lacking characteristics of good principles. So I think you're absolutely right.
I don't know how many people will remember him, but Ralph Nader was somebody that changed the automobile industry by really calling to public attention problems with automobiles. He did it. And he's forgotten now today. I think if we took a poll of young people and said, who's Ralph Nader, they wouldn't know. But they do know when they get into a car that's better than it was 10 years ago. And that's because of Nader.
Yeah, that's a great example. So I love in the intro of the book, it has your viewpoint and explains why you think public relations really matters. So can you share with us why PR really matters?
If you don't have good public relations, it can all go south on you very quickly. And once it's gone south and once things aren't working out and you're being misinterpreted, it's very tough to turn things around. So real good public relations puts you in a situation where you don't have to turn things around, where you're actually advancing on an agenda. And that's extremely important. So again, I say to every client, what's the agenda? They look at me quizzically in the beginning. And I said, look, let's sit down with 3 or 4 things we want to accomplish. And they said, well, we want to accomplish all these things. I said, look, let's just do 3 or 4, even 2 or 3. And then let's figure out how we accomplish those things. And if we accomplish them, then we can do 2 or 3 more. And then 2 or 3 more after that. And eventually people will get a very positive view of the organization. That has worked over and over and over again. The discipline, however, of coming up with 2 or 3 focal points is just absolutely essential.
Yeah, I really love that too. When we do strategic communication planning, that's absolutely the question. Who are the target audience members? Who are the real influencers in this space that if you get their buy-in and approval, if you're in good relationship with them, that's going to change everything and advance our goals. What is that ultimate goal? 1, 2, maximum 3 goals for this campaign. And it may seem, in some conversations, it may seem small, but when you're so focused, you're more likely to actually hit that goal. So I love that.
That's for sure. I mean, I think you constantly have to ask the question, why are we doing this? And if why we're doing this doesn't relate to the goal, stop doing it. Do something else.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my favorite question is why. Well, why have you done it that way? And why should this matter? And tell me why this is important. And in the wrong environments, I think that that's not always appreciated, but definitely as a PR counselor on the outside, that should be appreciated for sure.
It's an absolute fantastic way to go in life. I agree.
So, Robert, you have been in some of the most important conversations in probably every decade since you started PR. I would love your take on this concept that I have really put forward in the profession, this concept of smart talk. It's the name of this podcast. It's the kind of conversation I think we're having today, and also of my upcoming book. But Robert, what does smart talk mean to you?
Smart talk means to me, number one, using language to focus on an opportunity or a problem. That's number one. Smart talk means to me using powerful words, language, to get that done. Smart talk means to me get the timing right. You can't tell everything at one time. It's got to be done over a period of time. So the timing is absolutely correct. Smart talk is extremely important because a lot of people just blather on and they make huge mistakes. And once you've done that, trying to get back on the field is pretty tough. So smart talk ensures that you're going to win. And if you do, hurrah, that's a great thing. But smart talk's very important.
I love that. Hurrah. Smart talk. Well, Robert, this was a very intriguing conversation, and there's so much more to learn about what you do in your firm as well. So what's the best way for our listeners to either connect with you or get a copy of your book?
Well, hopefully the book's going to be in bookstores, and I think it is right now. And that's one way. Number two, we've sent the book to professors throughout the United States who teach public relations. That's a second way. A third way is if they want to tap into the website and reach out, we'll send them a book if they would like to do that. So there are a lot of ways to get the book. I hope that some people do, and I hope it's successful. I've had 2 bestsellers in my career, and they've both been extraordinary experiences because once you have a bestseller and it's up on the charts, all kinds of things come your way. Without a bestseller, you really have to work pretty hard at trying to make it happen. That's the way things go.
So is the Public Relations Handbook available on Amazon as well?
Amazon, you can get it. It's there as well, right? And I'm sure your book is going to be there too, and your book's going to be very successful. The title of your book, the background you've got in the book is going to be terrific. I think people will flock to the stores to buy it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I have a lot of hard-learned lesson stories in there. So at times it felt like part memoir as well. So it'll be interesting.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Robert, for sharing all your knowledge with us today.
I must tell you, Texas, San Antonio, Dallas, Fort Worth, I almost moved there once. Great people come out of Texas. Must be something in the water. But it's really a fantastic state with great can-do people. I'm not putting other states down. It's just that Texans do something really terrific.
Thanks, Robert. I appreciate that. And thank you to our listeners for joining us for today's episode. Keep an eye out for the release of Smart Talk, the book, this fall by following the podcast and our MVW Communications social media channels. And if you enter your email at mvw360.com/book, you'll get updates on the release of my book, opportunities for giveaways, and more. You'll be the first to know every milestone we make. And as always, think smart and communicate smart. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Smart Talk series. If you learned something or enjoyed our conversation, share it on social media or send to a friend. To learn more about this and other communication topics, visit mvw360.com. That's mvw360.com.